In order to explain Gersonides' approach to prophecy, we need first to look at his view of the laws that he believes govern human affairs. Think about it. If there are laws to tell us how humans of type A behave in situation B, then someone who knows these laws will be able to predict some human behavior. Now, while that's not exactly prophecy, it might well be a basis from which it can begin. So it's very important to note that in Book 2 of Wars of the Lord, where he is discussing prophecy, alongside, by the way, dreams and what he calls divination. Divination are more low-grade predictions, more often wrong, think tarot card readers. He tells us the following, that, here at the bottom of page 34, human affairs are indeed ordered by the heavenly bodies. And he goes on through page 34 and 35 to explain that he basically believes in astrology. The planets, the stars, their positions do govern human behavior, and they govern them pretty absolutely. There are laws that tell us that when a planet is in a certain position, then if you are, for example, a Pisces, then you're going to act in a certain way. It's like reading your horoscopes. Now, he does very importantly add here at the bottom of page 35 that people have intellects that allow them to act against those laws. If we were completely governed by the laws of the heavenly spheres, then we wouldn't have any free will. Gersonides admits that we obviously have free will, and that is due to our intellect that allows us sometimes to go against what our stars may have ordained for us. Now, the other important thing to note, here discussed on page 38 in the central paragraph, is that the thing that is responsible for these laws ultimately is our old friend, the agent intellect, or we know it better as the active intellect. The two are the same. Gersonides just happens, or at least in this translation, it is called the agent intellect. So the agent intellect is really responsible for all the laws of the universe, but it works through the heavenly bodies. By the way, here on pages 64 to 65, Gersonides discusses the difference between prophecy, which, as he puts it here, emanates from the agent intellect alone, and therefore is perfect. And he contrasts that with divination, with these kind of, lower grade predictions, because the lower grade predictions use the heavenly bodies. The heavenly bodies only govern particular parts of the universe or particular parts of our behavior, and therefore, if you know something about those, you'll often make mistakes. It's only if you have knowledge of the whole picture as contained in the active intellect that you can become a prophet. Now let's pause and review this. Basically, a prophet is now someone who gets communications from the active intellect, which is fine, but we need to understand how that works. It's not as if the active intellect speaks to us like God. It's not that type of thing. It's not a person. It's just this kind of impersonal source of the laws that govern our world, a sort of perfect computer program. So what exactly goes on when the active intellect communicates with us? Menachem Kalner, an American-Israeli scholar, gives a very useful analogy that he has actually picked up himself from Norbert Samuelson, and basically says the active intellect may be likened to a powerful radio transmitter that broadcasts constantly without knowing who, if anyone, is tuned into its broadcasts. Some people have excellent radio receivers with very high antennae. They pick up the broadcasts very clearly. These are the prophets who are tuned into the active intellect. This is absolutely central. Prophecy for Gersonides is an entirely natural phenomenon. What Kellner's telling us is the active intellect, the intellect that governs our world, contains within it, so to speak, all the laws that govern our universe and that govern, therefore, human action. It's constantly beaming those laws out. They're always there in the ether. A prophet is the person with the most perfect intellect who can pick up this knowledge that the active intellect is constantly transmitting, and therefore he can predict what will happen because he knows all the laws that govern what goes on in our world. So this is a natural view of prophecy. Maimonides actually describes this type of view in his second opinion. He lists 3 different opinions. Maimonides' opinion isn't exactly this one, but Gersonides' is. Gersonides' view measures up to the second opinion of Maimonides, and that says prophecy is a certain perfection in the nature of man. Right? If we go down here, things are as follows. When in the case of a superior individual who is perfect with respect to his rational and moral qualities, his imaginative faculty is in its most perfect state. And when he has been prepared in the way that you will hear, he will necessarily become a prophet, inasmuch as this is a perfection that belongs to us by nature. Now, this is quite a radical view. While on the traditional view, God miraculously creates prophets, on this naturalistic view, prophets are people who are morally perfect and who study very hard to perfect their intellect. They also, by the way, have to have a perfect imaginative faculty. The imagination in medieval times is a faculty that basically deals with images. So stories, for example, are a function of the imagination and things that we remember in images. And if that's perfect too, you will become a prophet. So it's nothing supernatural. This is natural. You can study to become a prophet. In fact, I might set that for you as your final assessment for this course, to become prophets. There's a further thing to note here. There's no need for some special divine element or Amir Ilahi, as with Halevi, because on this view, prophets, Jews for that matter, are just like everyone else. The only thing that distinguishes prophets is that they have studied and developed their intellectual potential to the highest degree. Now, there are different types of prophets. Some are better than others, the greatest of all being Moses, and that's discussed here, beginning page 72, where he talks about the perfect prophet. You'll deal with that a little later. But it's worth recognizing finally that this view will require us to reinterpret much of the Torah. According to this view, every time the Torah says that God spoke to a prophet, it actually means the following. God, being responsible for the existence of the active intellect and its truths, emanates truth all the time. And via the active intellect, these emanated truths are constantly in the air on our world. When God speaks to a prophet, what's really going on is simply that a prophet is picking up those truths, understanding those truths, and transmitting them to the people. God doesn't speak to anyone. No words are involved. All that happens is a prophet picks up on the truths that are out there and communicates them for the benefit of humanity. Now, let's be honest, that is quite some way from, and God spoke to Moses. There are a number of further issues here too that we will address in the final exercise, where hopefully you will consolidate the view we've just discussed.